Hello, couples, and welcome to Thrive, where we'll give you practical tools to build a stronger marriage together. I'm Tony.
And I'm Sam.
And we'll be your host through this journey together.
Thrive's focus is building stronger marriages together. Let me say from the beginning that the fact that you're watching this content is evidence of the fact that you want a strong marriage.
Yeah, and since Thrive was designed to be done together, we've done our best to create practical content that you can apply to your marriage today.
And speaking of marriage, remember that day when you stood in front of your family and friends and looked into your spouse's eyes and repeated words like, for richer, for poorer, for better, or for worse? Come on, remember. Honey, do you remember that day?
I do remember that day. I remember thinking how good you look.
Come on, I look good today.
Okay. Oh,
I'm just kidding. Quarantine weight.
Okay, thank you. Now that may have been a year ago for you, or maybe it was 30 years ago, but there's something all of us really do have in common. Our marriage started on that day. And since that day, it's been what we've made of it. Now, we've gone through some good times, and we've gone through some really rough times, but it's all what we made of it. And as you consider what the journey will be from this day forward, it'll be what you make of it, for better or for worse. Now, it's possible you have a picture of what a stronger marriage could look like for you, or maybe you don't. You may find it really easy to identify your spouse's shortcomings, but it may be a little harder to see your own.
What? I have shortcomings? Is that what you're saying?
Just a few.
Listen, I know that I have just a few. You may find that you and your spouse have different pictures of what marriage should be. It's a good point. It's only natural that could happen because, after all, you are two different people. You have different personalities, histories, assumptions, and different ways of doing things.
Yeah.
Can we give some examples?
Okay, let's do it.
Things like loading the dishwasher.
Ooh.
Is there a right way to load it?
I mean, yes, you just squeeze as much as you can fit into the dishwasher, and then you just shut the door really quickly.
Now that's exciting to think about, but it's not right. No, honey, listen, you have to make sure to place the dishes in the right manner so the spinners can properly provide the coverage that it needs in order to wash.
What?
Does that make sense?
No. Okay.
I mean, I'm saying your way was okay, but
Whatever. Okay, listen, we know now
Yeah.
that it's not really about the dishwasher.
marriage can be like cooking a great meal.
Yeah.
You first have to take a look at the ingredients you have. And each one of us brings ingredients into our marriage. You know, when a really great meal is cooking and you can smell it, that's what we want. Makes me hungry just thinking about it.
Yes, but let's face it, sometimes something's burning. The fact of the matter is that when two people bring all of those differences into a marriage, you have to be intentional to make a relationship work. And you have to continually learn as you go. So that begs the question, how do you make the most of your marriage? Well, you begin by figuring out where you are and how you got there. You have to take a close look at the atmosphere you've created, and you have to identify what you brought into the marriage, either intentionally or even unintentionally.
The purpose of Thrive is to help you do just that. You'll celebrate the strengths of your relationship and hopefully shed light on the areas for improvement. And we all have areas to grow. But we want you to know one thing as you begin. No matter what you've been through, it's possible to build a strong marriage. Somebody needs to receive it. And you don't need to take our word for it. Listen, God has something to say about marriage. He actually has a lot to say about relationships and how to nurture growth. And why wouldn't he? He created it all. The same God who created the universe created marriage. And he wants your marriage to work. That's why we'll look to Scripture for some wisdom and guidance.
Yeah. So our challenge to you for the next 6 weeks is to consider what you can do to build a strong marriage. Now, don't worry about what your spouse is doing or even thinking. If your goal is to change your spouse, you will be frustrated. But if you are willing to look at yourself and consider what you can do to be a better husband or wife, your marriage will grow stronger.
That's right. So let's jump into session 1. I'm super excited for you to hear from Russ and Danielle West. Russ and Danielle have been married for 16 years. Listen, they're heavyweights. They've led couples through Thrive for over a decade. They are also the founders of Intentional Marriages, a marriage ministry that has helped hundreds of couples experience a thriving marriage.
That's right. Russ and Danielle will unpack a principle from Scripture that's so key for husbands and wives. And they'll share what that's practically looked like in their own marriage. And then Sam and I will be back at the end to wrap things up.
Marriages are worth working on, just like our careers are worth working on, our health is worth working on, our finances are worth working on. No one stands at the altar thinking they'll be part of the high divorce stat. So what can you do to be on the winning side of this statistic? You begin the work of building a thriving marriage by looking in the mirror, taking an honest assessment, and then working on what you discover. Working on your relationship creates a thriving, stronger marriage. If we don't, we lose the potential of our dreams for a happily ever after. I don't know if you've ever gotten to this point in your marriage, but in our first year, I wanted out. I didn't know how to express my frustrations. I cried myself to sleep and kept my hurt to myself. It was the commitment of us going to counseling the past 17 years, almost once a month, where we learned our individual roles in the state of our marriage. Now, we're not going to suggest that it'll take you 17 years of counseling to learn these techniques. Our hope is for us to reduce these lessons that took us decades into days for you.
Yes, we made a decision before we were married to go to counseling. Now, this wasn't necessarily out of being wise, but out of fear. Danielle was afraid of repeating her parents' marriage, and I was afraid of getting divorced again. In my first marriage, I was blindsided when my former wife asked for a divorce. Now, she would have told you that I should have seen it coming, but men, as you know, we can all be knuckleheads. So counseling helped me see my role in the divorce. It was a real wake-up call, a 2x4, if you will. Now, and I didn't want it to happen again with Danielle, but before you know it, life gets busy, you're living parallel lives. So Danielle and I decided to commit to seeing a counselor on a consistent basis for the rest of our marriage. And we've been going to the same counselor for the past 17 years. And this was our plan for being intentional to both work on ourselves and our marriage.
I'll never forget going to counseling with Russ and how I couldn't wait to tell on him and watch our counselor fix him, but that only caused our counselor to work on me instead.
Yeah, it only took Danielle a few times to realize it would boomerang back and hit her in the head every time that she wanted our counselor to fix me.
It can be easy for us to think to ourselves, if only my husband would, or if only my wife would. We may be tempted to think that working on our spouse is a way of working on our marriage, but it doesn't take long to see that it isn't very effective. Take a listen at what marriage expert Dr. Gary Smalley said on this subject.
This is what Gary said. He said, it's a lie to think you can change your spouse. You think you can change them, and you believe that if you change them, you'll be happier. Now, that's the lie. All the research shows it never works with anybody. So I tried changing my wife, and she tried to change me, and I gave up. So after 38 years of marriage, I began the wonderful adventure of working just on me.
Dr. Gary Smalley wasn't the first one to recognize this. Matthew was a first-century tax collector who became a follower of Jesus. He was an eyewitness to Jesus' teaching and recorded what he saw in the book of Matthew. Listen to what he records that Jesus said. It says, "Do not judge, or you too will be judged. How can you say, 'Let me take the speck out of your eye,' when all the time there's a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite, first take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye." Now, Jesus didn't say it was wrong to help your spouse overcome defects and flaws, to take the speck out. He said you could only do that effectively when you've dealt with your own junk. Then you can see clearly to lovingly help others deal with their faults.
Our marriages will get better when we work on ourselves, regardless of whether our spouse works on themselves. For example, our expectations will decrease while our peace increases. So working on ourselves will help us take more responsibility for any negative baggage we bring to the marriage. And what this will do will naturally help us draw closer to each other. Now, for us fixers, our spouse does not want us to be the captain of their personal improvement program, right? Instead, they crave our acceptance of who they are, including the habits that irritate us. Instead of constantly telling them how they should behave, model the behavior you desire or want from them.
We've learned that rolling your eyes at your spouse, being defensive, shutting down are all conditions of our own heart. Russ has been a great example of modeling the behavior he desired from me by looking at the plank in his own eye. Why don't you explain your thought process on this?
Sure. One of the ways that I've learned to make this principle practical is by paying attention to when I'm frustrated with Danielle. What I'll do is I'll ask myself this question: why am I so angry? And when I get upset with Danielle, her action normally creates a level 2 kind of frustration, but my response is a level 10. And it doesn't correlate to the situation. So I know it's on me to walk myself through this exercise. So here's what I do. I ask myself, why am I so angry? And of course, immediately my brain says, well, it's because of what Danielle did or said. And I'm like, no, why did her words or actions make me so angry? Well, it embarrassed me. Okay, but why does being embarrassed make me so angry? Because it reminds me of how I hated to be embarrassed by my dad when I was growing up. So when I have an intense, angry reaction to feeling embarrassed, I'm actually reacting to how I felt when my dad embarrassed me. I'm having that 10 response to a 2 circumstance. And here's an example. Danielle can misunderstand something that's said in a group setting, and it embarrasses me. But unfortunately for me, I feel that same intensity of embarrassment that my dad made me feel. So I quickly jump in and point out how she's wrong and correct her. And as you can imagine, this does not end well for either of us.
No. But Russ has modeled paying attention to his emotions really well for me, because I notice being on the receiving end of him being so angry creates an air of defensiveness within me. And most of the time, it's not a natural tendency to be the first one to take responsibility or assume the best of our spouse. But when Russ goes through this exercise on his own, he comes back to our conversation, taking responsibility for the argument, which helps me drop my guard and take ownership for what I could have done differently.
And as Reggie Campbell says in his book, Radical Husbands, when there's tension in the marriage, let go of the rope, because we're all trying to win a tug of war.
But it's so hard to let go of the rope because I have lots of ideas on how to fix things, especially you, but for some reason you don't appreciate that.
Oh yes, how well I know. But seriously, one of Danielle's greatest strengths is she's a great problem solver. She's a true fixer. She's constantly improving situations, which is why she was so successful in the business world. And unfortunately, it's a big challenge in marriage, as we do not appreciate being constantly improved or fixed by our spouse. The truth is that you may feel like your spouse's flaws are log size while yours are only specks. And it's possible that you may be correct. But Jesus warns us not to begin there. The most effective way to change our marriage for the better is to deal with whatever is in our own eye. Changing our marriage begins with a choice to change ourselves.
Another principle we've learned is we judge each other harshly, but not ourselves. The only thing I can see are Russ's actions or what he says, but I don't know his intentions. It's why we get so frustrated with each other, because sometimes actions don't reveal the true intentions.
Yeah, here's an example of a big fight we had the first year of marriage. It was late one Friday afternoon and we had a wonderful date planned that night. And a friend of mine that I hadn't spoken to in a long time called me and wanted to know if I wanted to go to the local high school football game. But I told him I couldn't, but hoped that he had a great time. Then Danielle on her way home called me and I told her about my friend's conversation. Well, her response was, well, I hope you have a great time. And I immediately got angry and had a very negative reaction, because I assumed that she thought I wanted to go to the game with him instead of the date with her, when actually she was trying to be kind and putting me ahead of herself. So I incorrectly judged her intentions based on her actions. Now, our spouses can't read our minds. It's important that we assume the best, that we ask clarifying questions, and we coach each other on what we desire or want. And we're going to talk more about coaching each other in session 3.
Before we talk about baggage, let me add one point. These principles apply for all marriages. However, in some marriages, a spouse may be facing extenuating circumstances, such as addiction or mental illness. If that's your situation, we would encourage you to see a professional counselor for guidance on the best way to handle it. This material will help because every marriage has termites in the basement. But in addiction is a fire in the kitchen. The house will burn down if you're only focusing on the termites in the basement.
That's a great point. Now let's talk about baggage. When we get married, everyone shows up with a U-Haul full of baggage. That baggage is unmet needs and expectations that we subconsciously put on our spouse. Now, Danielle and I had tractor trailers full of baggage when we got married.
Yes, mine was a single tractor trailer, and remember yours is the double tractor trailer.
Unfortunately, that is so true. Now, a marriage counselor shared a stat with us when we were engaged. If you take the percentage of couples that get divorced and combine that with the percentage of couples that never get divorced but never have a healthy marriage, he believes that combined percentage is 85 to 90%. So he asked us why we thought we would be in the 10 to 15% of long-term healthy marriages.
And if we weren't scared before, we certainly were now.
So the answer on how to be in the 10 to 15% club is to be intentional. It's not just going to happen because we were made for each other. Our pastor, Andy Stanley, did a great 4-part series called Staying in Love, which we highly recommend. And I love his tagline for the series. He says, it takes a pulse to fall in love, but it takes a plan to stay in love. So what's your plan? If your objective is to change your spouse, you will be frustrated. If you're willing to look at yourself, though, and see how you can be a better husband or wife, then your marriage will get a lot better.
And a plan can be as simple as just showing up over the next few weeks. Ask curious questions of each other and discuss the content. We are so glad you're here.
It really can be easy to mask our judgment of our spouses by just saying, I just want to help. I've been there before. And before we are tempted to start focusing on the specks in the eyes of our spouse, we have to be willing to deal with our own planks. And it takes work to start with ourselves.
That's right. The good news is that God knew it would be difficult for us to love others like that. So he gave us the help that we would need. Listen to this verse from Paul, who was writing to a young follower of Jesus named Timothy. For the Spirit God gave us does not make us timid, but gives us power, love, and self-discipline. 2 Timothy 1:7. If you're a follower of Jesus, you have God's Spirit within you to give you what you need to start with you. You don't have to do it alone. God is with you and he will help you.
So, before we give you time to talk as a couple, consider this. What would happen if your first response when tempted to judge your spouse was to start with you? What if your first response was to go to God and ask for his help to see clarity on your own faults? What if you decided to give up trying to change your spouse? Now, you may be tempted to think that this type of response gives your spouse a get-out-of-jail-free card to continue doing what he or she is doing. Now, that may happen, at least initially. Your spouse may not immediately change in the way you had hoped, but you know what will change? You. You'll change, because your first response isn't to identify a speck. And, in time, your spouse will notice your changed behavior. Your spouse will realize that you stopped trying to play God by orchestrating his or her personal improvement. And perhaps, in time, your spouse will find it easier to start looking at himself or herself in the mirror first as well.
And can you just imagine if both you and your spouse take that perspective of working on yourself first? That puts you on the superhighway to a strong, thriving marriage. Now, we want to give you time to talk as a couple. We've provided a few questions for you to discuss together. This is a chance to really listen to your spouse, and it provides a great opportunity to put into practice what we've talked about in this session of working on you first. Here are some ground rules. Resist the urge to be defensive or to correct. And as you discuss your answers, be truthful, loving, and humble. This is the part you might be tempted to skip, but really, this is the part that can make the biggest difference in your marriage. So we are going to say goodbye for now, so you can discuss these questions as a couple. We'll see you next time.